Hello and welcome to the Facing Up podcast with me, Luke Grenfell-Shaw. At the age of 24, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And since then, I've had to face up to a number of challenges in my own life, which has led me to ask the question, how do we face up to challenges? And to try and help me answer this question, each week I talk to various different people who have insights from the challenges that they have faced in their own lives. Now, this week, I am joined by Ryan Pyle. Whenever I have a podcast episode, I tend to be excited, and today is no different because Ryan is an award-winning, world record-breaking adventure documentary presenter. He has been, his programs have been screened on the BBC, National Geographic, Discovery Channel. He's done all sorts of crazy adventures from motorbike to going on foot. And that is all pretty exciting and pretty interesting. However, what I think is even more interesting, actually, and this is from some chats I've had with Ryan in the past, is that from the outside, Ryan seems to be living the dream. And I think perhaps to an extent he is. And it's certainly the sort of dream that when I started from cycling from Bristol to Beijing, that's kind of the direction that I was aiming in of I really want to film everything that I'm doing. I want to tell the story, and chatting with Ryan made me realize that there is a lot more to just producing, producing adventure documentaries for the big screen or, for your TV screen, than just rocking up with a camera. And it is a lot more challenging than that. So today we're going to discuss a bit about the challenges that you faced in getting into adventure TV, perhaps go behind the scenes of what your life is like, which in some ways sounds idyllic, traveling the world, and I think other ways brings a lot of its own challenges. But first, I thought we could start by going back to a different dream of yours and a different challenge, and that is when you played basketball, University of Toronto, wanting to go pro. So Ryan, thanks very much for joining Facing Up. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you've come a hell of a long way from, you're now producing these, top flight adventure documentaries. But you started off, I think I'm right in saying, wanting to go, be a professional basketball player, right?
Yeah, I think, every North American kid wants to grow up playing baseball, American football, or basketball. And just like every probably kid in the UK wants to grow up playing, top flight football, perhaps. That's kind of the dream. So, when I was young, I got to watch, great basketball stars like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and got inspired by them and had the dream of maybe playing professional basketball someday. But like 99.9% of these journeys, they ended up in not playing professional basketball.
Right.
But, my sporting career was fantastic. And it kind of ingrained so many good qualities, about just leadership and hard work ethic, working as a team, punctuality, just things that people don't necessarily have a grasp on as adults sometimes. And I just feel it's really helped me with my work and my business and of course my adventuring.
Right. Okay. Something I can relate to, having done a year of rowing, like the importance of showing up on time. And if everyone shows up on time, you get the boat out and you have a good training session. And if everyone turns up a little bit late, then, you waste so much time.
The momentum dies very quickly
Right.
when people are lazy or not showing up on time. So it's really important. Yeah, just keeps everyone moving in the same direction and keeps the positive energy flowing, because you can lose it very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? It's you all need to the momentum can go. I was wondering, your father played was an Olympian, right? Playing
Yep, that's
water
correct. He
polo.
was, yeah, water polo in 1972 Olympics in Munich,
Wow.
Germany. So he
Wow.
represented Canada, which was amazing. And it's great when he gets together with his old water polo buddies that he was with, because they obviously have some great stories.
I was wondering if that made it particularly difficult abandoning, or maybe abandoning is quite a strong word, but moving away from your dream of playing basketball, whether there are any expectations that you'd put on yourself or that you had in your family.
I really wanted to be an Olympian. Like, obviously, I was incredibly proud of my father and what he accomplished, and that was definitely one of my goals, is to represent my country. And my dad was great. You know, he got me swimming at a very early age. I even played water polo for a time period, but you know, I just never gravitated enough to me loving it. And then I picked up a basketball and loved it, and he just supported me, my mother, and he supported me incredibly, you know, with my basketball career. And yeah, I always did want to follow in his footsteps and play for Team Canada. I thought that would have been amazing, but it just wasn't meant to be. And I think that you know, it was devastating, you know, to have your career end. I mean, everyone's career ends at different stages. A lot of people's, you know, they don't get to play in university at all. And I was
Mm,
very fortunate enough to play in university, and then I wasn't able to go beyond that. And the problem is that I think so much of your identity at a young age is wrapped up in sport when you are a young athlete and playing at a high level. And when so much of your identity is wrapped up in one thing, and then that one thing is gone,
mm.
it's really dangerous. And I suffered. Like, I was very depressed for a while, and that's actually one of the reasons why I went to China, because I just wanted to kind of create a whole new world for myself. And I did that. That was probably one of the reasons why I did that. And if I had maybe played for the national team, or if I had had the chance to play professional, maybe in Europe or something, there's a pro league in Europe, then maybe I would have postponed that or never done that. And in which case I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
Wow. So, actually, you know, because you graduated and then you went to China, you're saying that actually going to China was in some way you trying to form a new identity. Because it,
100%.
okay.
Yeah, 100%. Because, like, you know, I didn't want to stay in Toronto, Canada, where I had grown up and where I had played basketball. Um, you know, I really just felt like I needed to get away and find something that for myself that was mine. Um, and I don't know. I just needed like a clean start, and I just wanted to see something different and do something different. And I was surrounded. You know, I was very lucky in university. I had very good summer jobs that paid well, and I always had a little bit of extra money around, and I was always able to travel a little bit.
Hmm.
And when I graduated, I just went to China because I just needed to like clean my slate, you know, just emotionally empty myself out and fill it back up with something new. And that was what travel did for me.
Right. Okay. That is so interesting because I think so many. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of my friends, you know, graduated from university. That wasn't so long ago. For me and a lot of my friends, and it's very difficult to know what you want to do, what the next stage is. You know, some friends were like you, like very much into sport. I think I was one of those people. I did a lot of triathlon, and it is quite difficult to know where to go next. And I think for a lot of people my age, and you know, I went to University of Durham. You know, a lot of people go to London, go to work for the big four. You know, like PwC, EY. This is a good memory test. You know, the rest of the big accountancy firms.
Sure.
I found it incredibly important to go traveling and to see what else was out there. And it sounds like that was something that really helped you as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why we hit it off, because our first conversation was a private conversation.
Right.
We had a phone call a few months ago now,
Yeah.
when I first arrived in Istanbul.
Mm.
And I sensed that from you right away. And I think, you know, I think it's really good for people to take gap years between high school and university. And I also think it's really good for people to take a year off of university after university and just travel, because I think you just learn so much about yourself when you're away from home. And I think you grow up and you mature and you have a much greater sense of who you are and what you want. And when you give yourself that time to think, and then you do come back into your normal life or your real life, then I think you're a much better person and a much more complete person. And I believe it'll help you with your direction and your focus and your desire of being, you know, just achieving what you want to achieve, I think.
I would completely agree there. I think the time out to reflect back on yourself and like what you want from life, it's so easy, and actually it's a very scary thing, I think, to stop and go, wait, this, if you've got a clear direction that someone has given to you, and whether that's your university or an employer or your parents, it's very easy just to like channel for that, because it gives a lot of meaning in your life. But to actually take that step back and actually I think maybe now during coronavirus, COVID, a lot of people have had to sort of pause. It's something even though I've taken years traveling, I've got into reading some texts that have like really sort of made me stop and think, oh, what direction do I want to go in? And I think it's such a, as you say, how to round yourself out, how to work out what at the end of your life will make you glad that you'd lived the one that you did live in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been someone who, puts more weight on experiences versus material goods. And I think that's one of the things that travel has taught me is, the memories and the people I meet and the things I get to do are ultimately who I am and not what you own. And I'm lucky that I get to make television shows about that. And those television shows kind of lock that memory in place for me, and I can go back and watch the shows, and people can share and enjoy, the things that I've had the chance to do. But it definitely has helped me identify like who I am and what I want, and help me kind of see the world and where I fit in it much more clearly.
I think it's something I've come to realize over the past 2 years of aiming to live a life rich in experiences above all else. And money, I'd be interested in your take on this, but I feel money is useful, but only as a means to live experiences and then also negotiate or overcome barriers that then prevent you from, or make it, making it easier to go out and travel or whatever.
Money is very important. Like we don't have to, we shouldn't make, false claims. We do have to eat. We do need a roof over our heads. But I think you're right. Money as a way, earning money as a way to further, the richness of your experiences, I think is a great way to live. And I think that, if you can make content along the way, and share that content and inspire other people, then, even better.
Right. And that's what you did, isn't it? When you moved out to China, you weren't planning to stay there, but you ended up making a career out there.
Yeah. So I went to China my first time for 3 months, and I went as a backpacker. I just had a backpack. I had a little Canadian flag on it and, the whole thing. And I was going to go for 3 months and then just come back to Toronto and get a job and live my life out. And I was just so amazed by what China had to offer and what travel had to offer that that I decided I just wanted to stay in China. So what I did was I actually went back. I did my 3-month trip. It was amazing. And then I went back to Toronto, told my family I was moving to China, and then I moved to China. And that was the start of it. And then it's funny, one of the things that happens to you when you are a student athlete or a young athlete is you don't grow up a very well-rounded person. You're so focused on sports, you don't have any other interests. And I was very much the same way. And once my sporting career was gone, then I started realizing like I loved writing and I loved photography and I loved learning about other people. Like I was too busy all the time and too tired to care really about anyone else, apart from my teammates and my coach.
Yeah.
And and then now all of a sudden I could, just walk down streets endlessly and chat with people and stop in at, tea cafes and noodle shops and whatever. And I just had all this time and energy to meet and connect with new people. And that was it. I mean, that was the version of myself I liked the best. And I was just like, I need to figure out how to be this version of me every day. And then I just worked at trying to make a career out of it.
I'm really interested by this. You're saying that you weren't that well-rounded. You'd just been sporty. Um, did it then feel like intimidating or a big challenge to create this Ryan Pyle who was well-rounded? I could feel that, coming from background where you're like, Christ, uh, I don't know how to write. I don't know how to take photos. I don't even know how to talk to people, maybe. And then suddenly it seems like it could almost be intimidating. Is that how you saw it? How did you
No.
see it?
So I've always been a pretty confident person. I think the
Right.
sporting background has helped with that. So I was always like, I will figure this out. I will make a career out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I will get the hang of how to do this. And I never really had a lot of self-doubt. Transitioning to television was definitely harder,
Right.
only because television's more expensive,
Mm.
and it's more of like an elite group of people that make it, and it's a little bit smaller circle of
Mm-hmm.
people. But that was maybe a harder transition. But going to China and making a living writing and doing photography, was a challenge for sure, but it was definitely something I thought I could do, and eventually got through and did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question which reflects more on me than the subject of the question, but um, a preconception that I have of China and the Chinese, and I am so aware of how bad this sounds, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's on my mind, and maybe it's on other people's minds too. In the UK, my the general way I see Chinese people um, comes, at university. There's a group of Chinese people who tend to be quite self-contained, tend to be talking in Mandarin. Often, tourists taking, I don't know, if you're in Oxford or Cambridge, taking lots of photos. Um, and I'm aware, but I don't really know to what extent, that is such a tiny snapshot of what it's not even really a snapshot of like what China is about, but it certainly affected the way I see Chinese people. And I'm not proud to say this, but I'm now wanting to understand better. Can you tell me what you love most about China and interacting with the people that you've had ample opportunity to talk with throughout China?
Yeah, I think the Chinese tourists when they go abroad are pretty terrible. Like I think we can all agree with that. And before the Chinese tourists had money to spend, it was the Japanese tourists. They were
Okay.
the ones that were going to America and going all around in the 70s and the 80s, and then in the 2000s it was the Chinese, and there were big tour groups and taking snapshots, and yeah, it's just the cycle of life. But I think the one thing that you can't do is let that those people who go abroad affect your vision of what that country actually is, and sadly that happens with everyone. I think you meet a Canadian, you like him or her, and then you think Canada's great. You have a bad experience and then it taints all Canadians for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So this is how we build stereotypes, and this is how racism begins and
Right.
and uh,
Yeah.
and and thrives.
So
But
you're going
for
to
me,
steer well clear of the United Kingdom from now on, right?
yeah, exactly. Dodgy guys like you. But but China is an incredible country. And the thing that I was drawn to most is that I just didn't know much about it. So
Mhm.
in university, I ended up taking a course in my second year of university, and it was called like Introduction to Modern China. And that was like the first time I knew anything about China. And and I loved that course. And then I took another course the next year. And then by the time I graduated, I was like, well, I got to go see this country because it's magnificent. And the history is so deep and complex and challenging, especially in the last like 100 years or so, very turbulent. And then, but also too, you have this incredible diversity in China. The Western regions and the Southern regions are totally different than the Northern regions. People think Chinese people are all just like one group of people, but there's actually massive diversity within the country, and the landscapes and the history and the architecture are all pretty remarkable. And I would say that you could argue that within one country's kind of internationally recognized borders, you would struggle to find as much diversity in any other country as you do in China, just with regards to like ethnicities, religion, landscapes, architecture. I mean, you
Mm.
can travel like 100 kilometers and then be in like a totally different world, where people don't even speak the same dialect or the language of where they were before. So, this vision of what we all in the Western world see of China, of like Beijing and Shanghai, those are just two cities out of like 100 cities that have more than a million people. So it's remarkable. And for 16 years, I called Shanghai home, and I
Mm.
loved it. And I never got tired of filming in China, and I never got tired of exploring China. But
Um,
more of my work now is international, so it was easier to operate from outside of China.
okay, yeah. Um, as you know, and as many listeners will know, I was en route to Beijing on my bicycle. Could you give me a top travel tip for China and your favorite place that I should be going through? Preferably not like a kind of cliched place as well.
Yeah, I think your top tip for China is just go with an open mind,
Nice.
and try not to let all the things you read in the news taint your vision of what you're seeing when you're there.
Mm.
And and my favorite part of China, and sadly, it's an area of China that has been in the news for all the wrong reasons, but is the Silk Road. So that western part of China that goes from Kashgar, um, through the desert to Xi'an, which was the imperial capital of China. That those what 5,000, 3,000, 4,000 kilometers. The small villages you go through, the small towns you go through, the sections of the Great Wall you pass,
Mm.
they're all spectacular. And I really loved that part of the journey. That's where the romance of the Silk Road and the history and the great game and it all kind of ties in together. And
Yes.
I
And
actually made a
presumably
photography book.
you see the influences from not just China, but you're going to be seeing mosques, and you're going to have that influx of probably kebabs, and you would know better than me, but it's a melting pot of different cultures along that route.
Absolutely, yeah, and it was lovely. And also too, I spent a lot of time in Tibet. Like we did our motorcycle tour, Tough Rides China, that television show, through Tibet. We did a huge section through Tibet, and then I filmed the Extreme Trek Sacred Mountains in Tibet as well. So we did all these sacred mountains with pilgrims alongside them, and that was incredible. So
Yeah.
there's just so much going on there beyond just the big cities, and I think to this day, I still feel it's probably one of my favorite countries to film in, just because there's so much that can be done in one country.
And how's your Mandarin?
No, not very good. So even though I was there for 16 years, I definitely struggled with the language. Probably got to like a lower intermediate or an intermediate level
Okay.
by the time I left, and I should have been well advanced, but never really put in the time or the energy, sadly. So it was always
Right.
difficult.
And it's interesting as well. You're talking about, being in Tibet, being in the Xinjiang province, which is, as you mentioned, been in the news for plenty of rather sad, very sad reasons. Um, you worked as a journalist, taking doing photography. I think for like South China Morning Post, other publications,
Times.
New York Times, Wall Street
Yep.
Journal. Did you face challenges of like the restrictions of what you could report on? Because I'm guessing, because you were in Tibet, which I don't think is nearly so straightforward these days. If you're probably trying to report on things happening in Xinjiang province now,
Yeah.
that would be difficult. Was it a different time, or were there challenges still that you had to negotiate?
It was a different time when I was working. So I worked kind of as a photographer mainly, but also sometimes a writer for various publications, mostly American travel publications, where I did a lot of writing, and then the more intense journalist publications like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. They were mainly just photography, and yeah, we always had restrictions, and it was always hard to report on places. And China's always had this kind of cat and mouse game with the media, where they want to keep things hidden or under wraps, and then all of a sudden there's some expose. It's just part of their culture, sadly. This is probably one of the worst parts of the Chinese Communist Party. When you think about it, has done so much for the, since the 1980s for lifting people out of poverty, and building a middle class in China. And of course, lots of people have been left behind, and it hasn't been fair, and there's been lots of corruption, yes, but it has been also the greatest rise of people out of poverty that our world has ever seen. But the one thing that's kind of grown up with that is this fear of truth. And we saw it in with what happened in Wuhan and this whole virus thing about trying to suppress what's really going on, and instead of being more transparent. And that's always been a problem, even in 2002 and 2003 when we were working, when something was kind of happening that no one wanted anyone else to know about it, but actually knowing about it helps solve the problem. So there's lots of chases and getting detained, and all kinds of stories like that happened over the years. So that was kind of a regular for that job at that time.
And that presumably did not put you off.
I mean, I kind of enjoyed it. Like, you do get tired of it after a while. And actually that was part of my transition into television. Like, I just got tired of the cat and mouse game. And I also got tired of the international media's take on China. I just felt like it was overly negative all the time. And and even if there's like, the stories were factually correct, but it was just the eye of the editors and the eye of the writers was just always looking for the negative. And I was always there too, doing all this negative stuff. And I guess it's easy because there's more negative stuff probably than there was happening positive stuff, but the positive stuff was never being reported on. So I got really just tired of journalism in general.
Right.
Because I felt like that was a negativity trend that was starting then. And it's actually, you still see it today, negative stuff leads, and more people spend time watching it. And it's actually probably depressing the entire globe.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make happy stories. Like, I just got tired of just all the negativity. So I stopped working in journalism and stuff like that. And I just wanted to make television shows that that didn't deal with politics, and that didn't deal with all the bullshit, and that just people get bombarded by that crap all day long in the news media. Like, you cannot escape it. And then I want people to be able to come home at like 9 p.m. and turn on one of my shows and just drift into a world where none of that exists. And that was my goal in making my television shows, is just kind of creating an alternate travel universe where people don't have to deal with all the news that they consume on a daily basis. And I'm a much happier person because of that.
I think that's really interesting, because one of the conclusions I've come to myself is that life is a matter of perspective. That in the world, there's a huge amount of good and there's a huge amount of bad. And in any scene, I likened it. I had this realization, if you will, like in Interlaken when I was in Switzerland. Beautiful place with snow-capped mountains, beautiful river, lake. And I was looking out, and there's a scene, and like I can choose to focus on the mountains, and I can choose to focus on the lake, or I can choose to focus on the rubbish bin, and there was a couple of bits of litter in the street. And I feel in some ways like life is like that to an extent. I think it's important that we're aware that all of this exists, but what we choose to take in as our influences, I suppose, and what we choose to, I don't know, embrace. I think there are some really, really positive things in life. And yet, there's plenty enough that we can focus and be negative and be depressed because of everything that we see. So I think it's really interesting that you're trying to capture some of the good things, I suppose.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just decided, at the end of the day, the New York Times does a good job of reporting the news. I didn't want to be in that game because they're really good at it, and I didn't want to compete with them. So I'm just going to travel the world and meet cool people and have amazing adventures and eat nice food with them, and just, take people to an alternative universe. And that was kind of always the idea.
Right.
And maybe in some other show I make in the future, I'll talk politics with people and I'll sit down and chat with them, and that might be a part of some other show that I do. And I'm okay with that. But, at the moment, these travel shows I do, I really want people to escape. And I did an interview earlier today, and and it was with someone from Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has had a really difficult time the last year or so because they've had some protests, and they had this coronavirus, and now they're having some protests again. And this woman that I was speaking to, and she's known my work and followed me for a long time, she's just like, your show is just getting me through all of this. She's just like, I wait for it every week at 8 p.m. and it's just like my escape from the chaos of what's going on in our city. And I was like, that's exactly why I make it, because the world is a really, really hard place, and I don't want to make a living making it harder. And I just kind of came to that realization, like, is it responsible? I don't know. Yeah, I'm avoiding showing the garbage can, next to the road in Interlaken with the mountains. But at the same time, maybe I'm keeping people away from, losing their minds slowly, or I'm giving people some hope that there's something better out there. And I just walked away from journalism altogether. And it's funny, I still comment politically on things, and I have a podcast, which I talk about things all the time, and I have a degree in politics and international politics. So I have a lot of opinions about what's going on, but I don't want to bring them into some of those travel shows, just because I just want to keep it a pristine place for people's minds to go.
So this is really interesting, because it's something that I've struggled with quite a lot. When I started cycling from Bristol to Beijing, wanting to make some sort of travel documentary, realizing that when you're filming, you're not really filming real life. You're trying to often you're trying to capture the spirit of a moment, but that means constructing everything that happens to try and condense what happens in, say, for across a day into sort of like 10 seconds or 2 minutes of like, so you're kind of playing with the truth a bit. And I'm really interested to what extent you feel you are portraying real life, whatever that means,
Sure.
through your programs.
Well, I think we film in really remote places. So whatever happens out there, we film, and whatever happens out there, we do make, the story from what we film. What we don't do, and it's funny because people talk about this all the time. So I filmed an episode in Tibet, and we trekked around a mountain at like 5,000 meters with a whole bunch of pilgrims. And we made the story about the mountain and about the local pilgrims. And people were like, well, how come you didn't talk about the police? And it's like, well, we didn't see any police. And it's like, how come you didn't talk about like government restrictions and the government making lives difficult for the people? It's because like they weren't on the mountain. There was no government interference on the mountain. There were no police. There were no checkpoints. There was nothing, because we were at 16,000 feet, 5,000 meters above sea level in the middle of nowhere, in snowstorms. With local people who were much less well-dressed than us, and who were just trucking along because this is part of their religion and this is part of how they cleanse their soul. And that's what the story was. And I just didn't want to muddy it talking about a whole bunch of political stuff that wasn't actually happening in front of us. If something happens in front of you, you film it, you talk about it, but we never go out of our way looking for that stuff. And that's because we want to try to do justice to the story where we are at that moment. And again, these are travel journeys, travel journals. And yeah, so that was kind of the line we tried to draw in what we wanted the show to be. I'm talking about extreme treks and Expedition Asia specifically, and tough rides to an extent. But I just think that you can get yourself way out of whack if you just try to do everything.
Right.
If you try to be a political commentator, if you try to be an economic commentator, if you try to be a travel commentator, if you try to be like a gender, where are the gender biases, commentator, and you can really, then where's the direction of the show, and what are people watching, and how do people feel when they see you trying to tackle every single topic and obstacle that you come across? That's not, again, CNN does a really good job of that. I didn't want to compete with CNN.
Right.
I wanted to create something that was kind of timeless in a sense.
Yeah. So almost trying to capture a vignette of what was going on, rather than trying to show the whole picture, just portray what was in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was my alarm to let me know that you were actually waiting for me. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of where we stand on how we go about our filming and stuff.
I was wondering if we could go back, because we talked a little bit about your filming, but you worked hard to create a career for yourself, in journalism through photography, and then, the financial crisis comes along, and from what I've read, your career was kind of derailed.
Sure.
That must have been pretty, that was a tough time for so many people. And yet you seem to rebound, and a few years later, you were in TV, establishing yourself as a adventure documentary producer.
Sure. Yeah. So
It
that
wasn't that
transition was
straightforward.
that transition was terrible.
Right.
And this is the facing up to challenges, part of your podcast that people might just be interested in, is because, again, I was a freelance photographer and a freelance writer, and that's, you're working in the gig economy, and you get paid per publication, you get paid per photograph or whatever. And in 2006, 2007, and 2008, China was the best place to be in the world because it was the build up to the Beijing Olympics in August 2008. And this was going to be a huge coming out party for China. And every newspaper and magazine in the world wanted a China story. So I was working almost every day for 3 straight years going into August 2008. And it was incredible. Like, I could not have chosen a better country to work in to launch my career.
Right.
And I think it's important to know, like, I am where I am today because I moved to China when I was young. I had no debt. China, the living costs in China when I moved there were very, very small. Now they're different, but when I moved there originally, and I could take the risk and build my career without having the financial burden of living in a place like London, England, or New York in the USA or something like that. So I was able to keep my costs really low. And then also because of the interest in China with the build up to the Olympics, I was working a ton, and I was able to make a lot of money and save a lot of money. And my name was everywhere. I was loving it. Actually, if that had continued, I might have never done television. Like, that was, apart from just the negativity of it all, but it was a good life. And then in 2008 we had the Olympics, and then in September 2008, Lehman Brothers, the U.S. investment bank, went bankrupt, and it caused the housing crisis and the financial crisis. And of course, millions of people lost their homes and jobs, and it devastated financially. But one of the side effects of that was it also wiped out the publishing industry. Now, the publishing industry was already on its way out because everything was moving online. All the ad sales and all the classified ads were moving online. So those were the big earners for newspapers. So by 2009, I wasn't working at all, like zero, after having like 3 or 4 of the best years of my life. So it was a huge wake up call. So I decided that if I was going to keep making any content, and I still wanted to travel and meet people and see the world, that I was going to make travel content and make video and make television shows. And making that transition was very hard because, like I said earlier, it's a very small circle of people that broadcasters would like to work with. And if you don't have anything with your name on it that's out in the market, people just don't take a lot of risk because the money is huge. To sell a photograph, maybe it's $100 or a few $100s. To, a day rate for a photographer might be a few $100s, but to make a television show is, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
yeah,
the scale of what's going on is much more intense. So the risk is much higher. So it's just a much, much more difficult industry to break into.
So
And it was terrible.
Yeah. So, can you just take us through? I mean, I feel this is the sort of the crux of the podcast. The bit that someone says that bit was really tough, and then they skip forward like 2 years to when they'd made it. Like, can you just take us through, like, how did you actually approach the challenge of getting into an industry that you presumably didn't really know that much about? Yeah, you had a bit of background in the kind of journalism in general. but your revenue had dried up. Your identity as a photographer was in tatters, perhaps. How do you kind of even set a direction at that point?
Yeah, it was a directionless period of time, and it was very, very hard to like figure out how to navigate, because there's two things you learn in entertainment. Number one is no one helps you.
Okay.
No one helps you. And the second thing is that it's very hard to identify a role model, because everyone's journey through entertainment is totally different. Like, people can look at famous podcasters. Like, you pick the top 5 most downloaded podcasts in the world. Each one of those people has a totally different background, and they built up their following and for their podcast in completely different ways. There's no model to follow. And you can't just go to someone and ask for a job. So, so I thought to myself, again, I've always been a fairly confident person. I just felt like I could do it. And I kind of had watched a lot of TV, and I kind of understood how things came together. And it's funny, like, you just have to go out and do these trips. So no one wanted to work with us. No one wanted to fund us. No corporate partners wanted to sponsor us. I still have all the rejection letters from like all the big broadcasters around the world, many of who I work with now,
Okay.
because they didn't want to touch what I was trying to do at the beginning.
Because you were
And
some unknown guy
yeah,
who just
that's
said,
how
I have an
everyone
idea.
starts unknown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone,
Tell me about
like,
it.
yeah, exactly. The first step is, the hardest step. And the first step is, it lasts 10 years. Like, that's why if you want to get into this kind of business, you have to be really kind of dedicated to being in it for the long haul. Because if you're just doing it for a year or two, you don't get anywhere. So yeah, making that transition was hard. And the way we did it was, I just really believed in the project. And this was the Tough Rides China. My brother and I, having worked in the journalism world for so long, I really wanted to show a different side of China, a side that wasn't being portrayed in the media. And what I wanted to do was ride a motorcycle the whole way around China. And because that would show people all the different ethnicities and the minorities and the beauty of the landscape and the different cultures, and show them all the things that I felt were being kind of left out. And it's something that no one's really done before at that time. So I thought it was quite bold. And I thought that the boldness of the idea would lead to money coming in, but it didn't.
Right.
So my brother and I, we funded it ourselves. And we made the show ourselves, and which isn't something that everyone can do, and I appreciate that. But it was something that I could do, and decided that it was a worthwhile investment. And some people go to business school, and spend $30,000 or $50,000 a year going to business school for a year or two. Well, I put that money into my first television production, and I learned on the job. And that was 10 years ago. And now I'm a producer, director, and travel host. And I've made more than like 50 hours of television. So it's just like, where do you want to, do you believe in yourself to put your money in your own career, I suppose?
That's a really interesting comparison with business school. I hadn't thought about it like that
Or
before.
film school,
Right.
or whatever. I think the only one you can't get away with is medical school. You can't be like, I'm just going to figure out how to, you kind of have to go to medical school. But if you're an entrepreneur and you've got ideas, you don't have to go to business school. I mean, if you're a filmmaker and you're already making films and you already have ideas and you know how to edit and use cameras and create a narrative, you don't have to go to film school. Like, so it's just about where you want to put your money. And I think a lot of people are really insecure, and they feel like the more education they have, the better off they'll be. And I think that's true for some people. And if you need that, then you go for it. But I knew right away that more education was never going to help me. Like, when I graduated from the University of Toronto, and I'm very thankful for my education, and I'm very thankful for my time there. But at the same time as when I finished my basketball career, I also finished my university, and I knew I was done with structured education. Like, I knew I was finished with it, and I knew that what I needed to learn was out in the world, and that's kind of where I charted my path. And I taught myself how to write, and I taught myself how to take photographs, and won some awards. And again, I just taught myself how to produce television shows, and luckily I could look at the camera and deliver some lines without stuttering or stumbling, and I just went with it. And Yeah, and here we are.
That it's something that I've thought a lot about. I've been attracted by the idea of, say, business school, and setting up my own business. And so the first step is naturally to get a degree. But I think what you're showing, and say Joe Daniels, who was on the podcast recently, he didn't go to business school. He set up his own business because he believed in the idea. And it does, I think, these master's programs, or business school, film school, they provide this kind of safety net. One interpretation could be that they provide this safety net that says, I'm making progress in this direction, but without really jumping in and forcing yourself to sink or swim. It's kind of quite a safe way of doing it. And maybe it is the most effective way for some people.
Yeah.
But if you've put your life savings into something, you're probably going to be pretty damn keen to make sure it goes well.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting with a friend yesterday, Scott Wilson, and he's a television producer and television presenter as well. And he's like, at a certain stage, your resume and your certificates don't matter. It's all about what you make. And we live in a world now where we have all the tools to make whatever we need to make, because of our technology that we've created, and that allows us to have this chat today. And we can make whatever we need to make. So don't show me certificates, show me what you can make. And if you're passionate about it and the stuff you're making is good, let's have a talk. And that's kind of how you do business. And that's kind of where we are in the entertainment world, is I don't want to see pieces of paper with your name on it. Show me what you can make, and show me that we can go into battle together for 60 days or 90 days or a year and come out with something that we can share with the world and they'll like it. That's what it takes. I've never, I have 6 people that work for me. I've never asked I do know 3 of them went to NYU, which is a very good film school. But I hired one of them while he was still a student, just because I thought he was open-minded and I liked him. And the other one, the other one wrote me directly and said, "Can I have coffee with you? I really like what you do." And he went to NYU, but even if he'd gone to another school, I still would have met him for coffee. And again, it's just like a personal connection. So yeah, I don't know. You just got to put yourself out there, man. I really, like you said, you can really kind of hide if you stay in higher education for too long. And I think that, you really have to step out into the void, because whenever you do that, the energy around you will change, and it might be negative and it might be positive. That's called risk. But if you don't step out into the void, you never change the energy. And if you don't change the energy, you're never going to progress or advance or grow. You're just going to stay static, and that sucks.
I think that's really true. I can think back to my first bit of very independent professional work, when I was working with this plant scientist who said, can you write a chapter on quinoa and like its kind of genetics that kind of make it resistant to like drought and salt tolerance and heat. And I was, and that was a big decision point, because I was like, I don't know anything about quinoa. Like, I've got a degree in biology, but like, but at some point you just have to say yes, and I'll figure it out. Yes, and I'm going to take responsibility for making it happen, however I get there. And to me, I'm still very much learning that lesson. But to me, that's a sort of lesson that you can't get from university.
No,
and it's
it
so
can't.
valuable.
I mean, Richard Branson, who's a great kind of entrepreneur and built up several big businesses and things like that. He said, anytime someone asks you something that you don't know how to do, you say yes and you figure it out. And that is how you build businesses, and that is how you create a name for yourself. And I think that's always, great advice. And do things that scare you.
Right.
Do things that make you feel uncomfortable. And living with that discomfort is called growing. Living with that discomfort is called, progression. And I think that, all of us want to create this little safe bubble that we can live in. And then you complain when every day is the same, and it's just Groundhog Day again and again and again. And you're caught on the, the treadmill of life, and every day is the same. It's like, well, you set yourself up like that. You wanted that comfort and you wanted that safety net, and now you've got it. And now you're complaining about it. you know, if you want to take risks and you want to create things and whatnot, you have to create a life around that and be conscious of it and plan for it.
So what is the thing that you've most recently done that has put you in a whole world of discomfort and maybe caused you to grow a little bit along the way?
Well, I just started my own podcast, so you know, you know, it's I'm a you know, you're a public figure. You're you know, you're on television shows all around the world and stuff like that, and I decided I wanted to make my first podcast where I interview myself, and I was brutally honest about failures, about mistakes, about being selfish, about being too driven maybe and too business focused or too career focused,
Mm,
and I kind of just forced myself to open up through that, and I was terrified, and then I put it out into the world, and that was kind of scary because you know people might think differently of me. They might think that I'm not the person they see on TV or whatever. But I think it's also I just want to be really authentic, and you know I am a person who's on TV, and I also have you know lots of doubt and fear. But I embrace that doubt and fear because I think that's where you can overcome you know your weaknesses and really make something happen. So I'm really happy with the feedback, and I'm really happy with the process, and I'm enjoying it, and we'll see where it takes us.
great. Can you give us a little bit of since we're on the topic of the podcast, can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of what it's going to be like? And I'll put the link in the podcast description. So if anyone's interested, do check Ryan's podcast out. But give us the elevator pitch for it.
Yeah, so it's called the Ryan Pyle podcast. It's a very creative podcast name. Took a long
I
time to come
love
up
it.
with.
I love it.
And it's basically just one episode is just going to be me riffing on kind of topics that I choose, and the next episode will be a guest where I interview someone who I've come across in my travels or has had an interesting career or is someone who's creative. And the goal for me is to do all the podcasts face to face because I feel like, which is difficult in these times,
Right.
but I feel like the face-to-face podcast is where you can generate a lot of you know really unique energy, and so I'm working on that.
Yeah. Nice. I'm really looking forward to listening to it.
Thank you.
So I will, yeah, let you know.
Yes.
Excited to hear all those topics. You were talking a bit about the environment, you know, putting yourself in an environment of discomfort. And something I've been thinking about quite a bit is, you know, the sort of, you know, you kind of reflect the 5 people that you're around most is sort of one sort of generic rule of thumb. Um, could you tell us maybe, and I guess this kind of maybe links in a bit with role models, who are the people who you look up to or you feel who challenge you, and you know, how do they challenge you? How do they bring out the best in you?
Yeah. You know, I don't have a lot of role models. Sadly, I mean, I like people who do tough things, but they're not always people that other people really know about. So,
Mm.
you know, I just get inspired by people I meet along the way. You know, I had this guide in Nepal. I was filming in Nepal a few years ago, and we were up in the Mustang Kingdom along the border with Tibet. And my guide, his name was Nima, and he was a Sherpa, and he was just this super quiet, super humble, super wonderful Nepalese man. But he'd summited Everest 5 times, and
Okay.
you know he'd spent like 20 years working on the mountain, and now he was kind of like retired from the high climbing, and now he was just leading treks and stuff like that.
Right.
And we just had a wonderful chat, and he was so
Mm.
humble and so sweet. And here he is, you know, 5-time Everest climber. No one knows anything about him. He doesn't have an Instagram account, and he
Mhm.
just goes along with his life and feeds his kids and takes care of his wife. And that was just so humbling. And whereas you know if you know if some American, for example, had climbed Everest 5 times or something like that, then you know he'd have like 500,000 Instagram followers, and he'd be on television every couple of days and giving talks and building out this whole like personality business around climbing Everest 5 times. But
Right.
actually, I was just kind of enjoying, you know, Nima Sherpa's company when we were walking through the beautiful mountains and valleys of the Mustang Kingdom, and he was a 5-time Everest climber, and had helped countless people up. Forget about just summiting yourself. He's the one, carrying the wealthy Western businessman up Everest, as well as summoning himself. So,
Right.
these people are heroes, man. And I meet people like this all the time. Like, I was filming in China, and we trekked across the Badain Jarain Desert in Inner Mongolia in China, and it was like 150 kilometers through this desert. And we had a 16 camel caravan, and my guide's name was Hasamong, and he was a local guy. He lived in the desert. He raised camels. They were his camels we took across the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And every day he would, get the camels ready, load up 16 camels of gear. And he wouldn't let us do it because the camels were crazy. They would kick and they would bite. And he always told us to stay away from the camels. So we couldn't help him. So it was him and two people who worked with him. And the three of them would load up these camels every morning. Then we would go like 20, 25 kilometers through the desert. Then they would unload all the camels, prepare a food tent, prepare a dinner. And it was like clockwork every day for like 12 days or something like that. And these guys just worked so hard, and they were just so used to it, and they loved it. And they loved being out in the desert. And I was just like, God, that's just so inspiring, to kind of have the chance to walk in their shoes. And, this is why I travel. These are the kinds of experiences that kind of motivate me. I mean, I could tell you I watched, Long Way Round, Long Way Down, and Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor looked like they had fun. So I decided to make a motorcycle show also.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
But they didn't inspire me. They just kind of showed everyone how much fun a motorcycle trip is.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do one too. And I kind of did it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But people who inspire me, I mean, you inspire me. I mean, we had a first conversation and you blew me away with your own life story and how you've overcome so much adversity at such a young age. So, you find inspiration from everywhere, but there's no other person in television that whose career I would love to have.
Right. I'm quite interested here that you're saying that in some ways, and I'm being a little bit provocative, you get all the credit. You're this amazing adventurer going off doing these treks, doing these hardcore things, but actually it sounds like the real hardcore people are, it's not you. It's not the white guy who gets his like stuff carried, who has a home to go back to in Shanghai or Dubai or wherever. The real stars of the show, it's not you. It's these other people. Like, how do you deal with I guess, on one hand, you're the center of attention, I suppose. But also you're probably quite aware, you seem like a pretty conscientious guy, that you're very lucky to be doing these things in the first place. And what you're doing for fun is someone else's life.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, so one of the things we do with the show is we always film the guide, and he is always getting kind of equal time with me on air. So he is essentially the second presenter. So I never, ever, ever make people think like I'm out there by myself. Mm-hmm. That's not what we do. So the guide is always part of the show. He's always leading me. He's always teaching me about the local culture and how to deal with the landscape. And that's just the way I feel is the safest way to travel. But it's also the kind of person I am and the kind of person I want to be on television. And we always film the guides. We always film the porters. We always film them doing all the hard work. And I always tell the audience that these guys are the real stars, and I'm just lucky to be here and be able to talk about it. And that's the kind of authenticity that we try to bring to the show. And that's just who I am. That's my tone. I have an Instagram account with a lot of followers, and I do talks all around the world, and I'm on TV all the time as well. And that, for me, all of that has to get done so that I can spend more time in the middle of the desert with Hasamong and his 16 camels. And that's what gets me to those places. And those are the moments I really cherish.
If there was an episode that exemplifies what you've just talked about most of all, which would you recommend that I and anyone else interested watches?
Well, I think there's an episode of Extreme Treks season 3 where we climb Aconcagua, in Argentina, which is the highest mountain in South America. It's 7,000 meters above sea level. And I'm not a mountain climber.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a guy who really likes being outside and really likes adventure. But I'm not a professional climber. So what I did was I found like one of the best climbers in the world, um, and convinced him to lead me up the mountain. And he
Okay.
got me up to the top. And it wasn't a triumphant, I'm at the top, I made it, I'm king of the world kind of moment. Like I was struggling, and we filmed the whole thing, man. And I
Yeah.
would like, there was a time where he was like, I didn't think you were going to make it. And,
Right.
I was like, I didn't think I was going to make it either. And, and, when I'm sitting there and I can't breathe, we're filming it. When I'm sitting there and I'm
Mm,
running, we're filming it. Like,
mm,
we just try to do the story as much real justice as we can. But again, climbing Aconcagua scared the hell out of me. And it's something I didn't think I was comfortable doing, but I thought we should try, and then
mm,
we'll know, right? And
mm.
that's, again, living with the discomfort, altitude sickness. It was minus 40 degrees Celsius when we went for the summit in the morning.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I loved it. And the great thing about Aconcagua is that I guess when we were there, which was quite late in the season, it was pretty quiet on the mountain. There weren't a lot of people, so it was really lovely. And Max, my guide, saved my life multiple times, and kept me motivated. And without him, I wouldn't have made it up the mountain, for sure. So, and we had like 10 porters as well. We filmed all them carrying all our camera gear up and down the mountain. So, I mean, I want people to see what it takes to film in these locations,
Okay.
and try to make that as authentic as possible. So I hope people appreciate it, because you don't get to see a lot of that on TV. And
Yeah.
that's why I produce my own shows too, is because I get to say what we show and what we don't. And that stuff's really important.
Right. So, um, you are now really established as a television presenter, as producing your own shows. You do get the opportunity to travel the world, give talks, have adventures. From the outside, this seems, yeah, as I said, anything in the introduction, like an idyllic lifestyle, right? Um,
Sure.
what are the challenges that go with it?
It's hard being on the move all the time. It might seem glamorous. We're talking about a pre-COVID-19 world, right?
Okay,
We're
yeah.
talking about 2019, 2018.
Yeah.
Traveling 250 to 300 days a year. Um,
Wow,
you know,
that's a
I
lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's
Your airfares must
it's
be horribly expensive, and your carbon footprint. Not that I'm going to go eco war on you right now, but like, that's intense.
yeah, yeah, it is. And I hope that the carbon footprint is a little better off, because I do spend like 10 or 14 days living in a tent without any electricity, walking every
Yeah.
month. So
Um,
um,
oh, are we back?
yeah, we're back.
Ah,
Were you still
okay.
recording?
Yeah, we are still recording. The last bit I heard was you're in a tent, walking for every month, for a month at a time. Every month you're walking in a tent.
Yeah, living in a tent for 14 days every month, and that's how I hope my carbon footprint is managed a little bit, with the flying. But it's hard being on the road all the time. You definitely lose a lot. There is cost to it.
Mm,
Maybe you pay for an apartment or a home that you're never in.
mm-hmm,
It's hard to keep relationships with people who don't live similar lifestyles, because you
mm,
just have less to talk about with them,
mm,
like and just relationships with people, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, they deteriorate for sure if you happen to be in this kind of work, because it's just hard to juggle everything. When you are the product, uh, it's just, you're on all the time, and you're constantly pushing yourself in your work. And for other people who don't know what that feels like, it's not something that they can deal with very easily, I think. So that's why I think a lot of people who are in the same industry like this kind of end up together, maybe perhaps just because it's kind of a strange mentality to have, where you're the product all the time, and you have to be pushing yourself all the time, because at the end of the day, you know, Discovery Channel or in BBC and all these people, like, they don't give me an annual salary. Like, I have to be out there making stuff and putting myself out there to make sure people watch the shows and things like that, so that I can have those beautiful nights watching the sunset in the desert with Hassamong in Western China with his
Right.
16 camels. And that's the kind of the part of the business that goes with it. And it's, yeah, it's incredibly hard. A lot of people gain a lot of weight in my business just because they're traveling so much and they eat really terribly.
Right.
But I'm lucky because I think my shows are really, really physical.
Okay.
And it's kind of kept some of the bad habits down. But it's definitely hard. It definitely costs, a lot of your personal relationships go out the window, for sure.
Is that because you simply don't have the time, or is that because you're not you're constantly at a distance, or is it because of the different experiences, or is it because actually you find that you're so different from everyone else, you know, you're
All of
living
the
quite
above,
unique?
like all of the above. I think you're just having such different experiences from people. It becomes hard to relate to a normal life again.
Mm.
You know, I think it's just hard. And also too, a lot of people don't understand this, but like when I'm filming, like last year I filmed 10 episodes in 10 months. So I had to do 10 expeditions in 10 months. So that means that for 14 days out of every month, one of our episodes is about 10 to 14 days of filming where we do these big expeditions. So that means for 10 to 14 days out of every month, I'm essentially offline. So when I come back online, then I have 2 weeks to do 4 weeks worth of work.
Mm.
And I have like 2,000 emails in my inbox and my phone is blowing up. And it's just like, okay, what fires do I have to put out now for work? And then it's like, okay, then you're getting back to some friends that are like, hey, let's watch the basketball game on Saturday. And it's like, I'm in Oman. I'm not any, like, you just can't even reply
As you do,
because
as you are.
you just don't. Yeah. It's just like, hey, let's get together on Sunday and like watch the cricket match or go to the rugby or whatever. And you're just like, I'm in Jordan next week and I don't know when I'll ever, you know, be able to sit down and watch anything again or something like that. So just these, you know, it creates a distance, I think, I think it can be very isolating, actually. I think it creates a distance between yourself and a lot of society. And I feel like maybe a lot of people in entertainment maybe feel the same way in some sense as well, because you've removed yourself from, you know, the everyday life of so many people. It's strange.
Do you feel lonely?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. You do. I think because there's very few people who can understand what you're going through. The constant insecurity is unbelievable because you never know where your next job is coming from. Even if you've just won an Oscar, for example, you still really never know where your next job is coming from. And you're only as good as your last whatever you created. So, you know, I'm launching a show right now in Asia with Discovery Channel called Expedition Asia. And I think it's going well and I'm really proud of the show. But if people hate it, I'm not going to get a season 2. And then I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my crew. And these things are constantly in my mind. And
It sounds like
it can be a little lonely.
it sounds like there's a huge tension between self-value and you being proud of what you've created and the reality that if other people don't like what you've created, you don't have a job.
Well, that's the shit of being an artist, man. Like that's the bitch of it all. Like, you know, you can spend 5 years making a sculpture and you'll think it's your own, you know, David, and you know, and then you present it to people and they hate it. Like that's the risk of putting your heart and soul into something, and that's the risk of going out into the void and changing the energy around you, because you never know what people are going to think, and it's terrifying. Like when you make a film, imagine people who spend years making feature films, big budget feature films with huge actors and blah blah blah, and then it comes out and people hate it and it makes no money.
Like
It's
Cats.
terrifying because you think you did something good, right, and you're proud of what you did, and then you show it to people and it's terrible. And that's the rub of being an artist. That's the rub of being in the public sphere. And when it goes right, it really goes right. And when it goes wrong, it's like, oh, like you just want to hide. But then you have to get out and do it again. And that's the really hard part. Like when you've just put out something that's terrible, and then you got to go back and motivate yourself to do it again at the same energy level and the same, devotion to the product. It's constantly terrifying.
How do you do that? Can you give us I don't know, is there an example of something that you've produced that hadn't gone as well as you'd liked, and then you were very deflated and then had to pick yourself up again?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problems that I've had in my career haven't necessarily been with the audience. Like, I feel like people, for the most part, like my shows. There's always negative comments on YouTube and, Amazon Prime and all this kind of stuff. People think, oh, this is terrible.
Too many Y's in this guy's name.
Yeah, whatever. One guy gave me a 1 star out of like 5 on Amazon Prime because he said my motorcycle show didn't focus enough on the motorcycles, because it was a travel show about Brazil, right? And we met people all around Brazil, and we learned about their lives. And so you can never make anyone happy, but so everyone happy. But the point is that when it's done, you're happy, and you have to be the barometer for your own success. And if it flies, it flies. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Where I've had real difficulties with broadcast executives, because they just move around so much, and it's hard to maintain momentum when people are moving and jumping to different companies, and when you're dealing with new people all the time. Because as a television presenter, my face is on my product, and I'm producing something with my face on it, and I have a tone and a way of living that I want to show in my show, and I don't want to change that, or add in sensationalized moments or fake drama, or give people ADD by watching my show because we're changing this the pictures every 2 seconds. I want people to sit with the show and really feel it, and really understand where I'm coming from as a storyteller. And a lot of people don't want to buy into that, especially people who have just come across from a new company, or they just got their job and they want to change everything.
Right.
And that's where I, find it difficult to maintain control over kind of what I'm doing. So that's where the real challenge has been, less with the audience, I think.
Okay. I'm also interested in this challenge of you said you're always on, like, you're the face of your programs, you are the product, but it's not just the filming, like it's social media. Like, you're pretty much every day you're posting something on Instagram or Facebook.
Every day I'm doing a 1-hour interview with someone on Instagram, right?
Right.
So I've done like more than 50 of them now. So you're constantly on, you're constantly creating. I actually like that.
Okay.
I actually like being busy. I'm lucky that I have a job that I don't feel like I'm actually working. I love communicating with people. I love having this talk with you. This is not work. This is 2 friends catching up. Like, I love replying to everyone on social media. I love it when people dedicate time to my content and tell me that they like it. Like, that just motivates me to keep doing it more and trying to make it as best as I can. Like, all that stuff is not a burden. But I really enjoy kind of being on and being engaged with the audience in a meaningful way.
Does that mean you're constantly on your phone? Because this is something I've noticed. I try to sort of cut down my phone consumption as much as possible. But, when you've got 90,000 followers on Instagram, you're going to get 5,000 seems quite a typical number of likes and kind of comments on your posts. Like, your phone is going to be going off the whole time. Like, how do you get stuff done? Like, how do you switch off?
Yeah, I mean, you try to reply to as many people as you can, but you also try to not let it take up your whole day. Obviously, now we're all kind of on lockdown and not working, so I'm definitely on social media much more now than normally. And don't forget too, like, I don't mind doing a lot of the social media work, because I spend 10 to 14 days offline every month, or at least I did when I was filming, and that was a great balance for me. So I loved turning off the phone for 14 days and not having a computer, and just filming and capturing stories and understanding people's lives.
Mm.
And then when I came back on, I was excited to see what everyone was saying and reconnect with everyone online. And that was part of the enjoyment of coming back to the real world. But then by the time I went out again, I was ready to leave the phone behind and digital detox.
And how do you relax? Like, how do you
By
find this
working.
balance?
By working.
Okay.
I spend 10 to 14 days working every month, and I
Mm-hmm.
sleep in a tent and I walk 20 kilometers a day. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the most relaxing thing I can do. And I'll tell you, man, I sleep better when I'm out working and sleeping in a tent and out in nature with no communication with anyone else. I sleep like a baby. I come back from filming so well rested to deal with the bullshit of our society and the cities and the way of life and the travel and everything like that. My sweet spot is being out in the wild working, and I don't feel tired when I come back from any shoot. I just feel like I'm ready to take on, the next challenge, and I'm lucky like that. I absolutely love it.
Right. That's very insightful, that the expeditions, which a lot of people might have thought are the tough bits, when you're slogging it, that's actually your downtime, the time to recharge the batteries, even though you're on camera and having to do pieces to camera.
I again, like I don't get stressed by it, and I feel very comfortable doing it. And I feel the whole style of the show is I'm out on a great adventure and I'm loving it. And when I'm out there, my two friends, Chad and Jesse, are filming me. Chad's my director of photography, Chad Ingram, and Jesse Rosenberg is my second camera operator. And we're out on a great adventure. And when I'm talking to the audience, I'm just talking to them. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, can you believe we're doing this? Like, look at that view, or like, look at this, or, you got to, and it's easy for me. I'm very lucky in that sense, I guess, but it's never work.
And I think that sounds like that's the ideal, isn't it? The thing that gets you money and allows you to live a lifestyle that you enjoy is also the thing that you do enjoy. We've talked a lot about challenges and some of the difficulties in your job. And I just thought to end, I know that you're a big fan of whiskey, and you're doing like your whiskey Wednesdays and stuff. But what is your favorite whiskey?
So I try not to mention any brands because I don't work with any brands, and I quite like a few different brands. But I will tell you that I am a whiskey snob. I am indeed, and I really, really love single malt whiskey from the Scottish Highlands. So that could be the Western Isles or Speyside.
Okay,
those are my two places, and you can. There's about 50 distilleries in those areas that I mentioned, and they're all the big ones: Macallan, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Bamore, Belvanny, Lagavulin, Laphroaig. Like they're all in that area, and those are my favorites. I don't really like blended whiskeys. I don't like. I'm not a gin guy or anything like that. I really, really just love pure Scottish single malt whiskey.
Okay. But hard to draw on exactly which one. But I've got some Laphroaig right behind me in my room. So,
do you?
Yeah, I do.
Well done.
I could pass it across the screen, but
well, I'll be in the UK someday. We will have a drink together when all of this has cleared up and we're back to our quote unquote normal lives, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that very much, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed chatting.
Thank you so much for having me. And anytime you want me back, I'm here. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And you're bringing out some great stories and some incredible people. So the thanks goes to you.
Such as you. And looking forward to chatting some more in future and hearing more of your podcast, and actually watching some more of your stuff as well. And I'm going to start with, what is it? Extreme Treks Season 3 in Argentina.
There you go.
Nice. Thanks so much, Ryan. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.